Why do we so often realize danger only when it's already too late to change anything? Why do words spoken on the edge of a joke and a confession find their true meaning only after the speaker has gone for good? On February 13th, hundreds of people stood at the gates of the school in Higuay. In their hands, they held white flowers, a symbol of purity, which now had become a symbol of profound loss. On the wall hung a photograph of 15-year-old Esmeralda Ríchez smiling. A year earlier, she had recorded a short video on TikTok in which Esmeralda, without any pretense, without a smile, predicted the date of her own death. At the time, nobody paid attention. We seldom believe our own premonitions, and almost never those of others. Now that phrase sounded like a verdict. People brought flowers not only in memory of the video, but because of the horrifying coincidence. A coincidence that turned randomness into fate, and the girl's life into a tragic mystery. Her mother held her daughter's photograph, her father held her notebook. On the surface, everything appeared calm, but the date itself had become a mark from which the burden of sight could no longer be turned away. Esmeralda knew her date of death. But why did no one hear the warning in her words? Why are we so often deaf to cries for help, masked as jokes or games? What causes us to wake up only when nothing can be changed anymore? And what can we do so we learn to listen and to hear each other before it's too late? Before the tragedy, the Ríchez family lived in a modest house on the outskirts of the city of Higuay, in the eastern part of the Dominican Republic. The neighborhood was considered safe. Neighbors knew one another. Children played in yards until dark. Doors were seldom locked. Elidio, the father of the family, ran a small roadside stand, and Isabel, the mother, took care of the home. The older daughter, Yurimar, was attending university, and the younger, Esmeralda, went to the local school. The family lived by strict but kind rules. On Sundays, they all went to church together. In the evenings, over dinner, they talked about the news, about school, about their future plans. The mother made sure her daughters grew up respectful and faithful. The father reminded them that respect for people was more important than any achievements. Their life was built on simple but steady principles. Esmeralda helped her mother, loved music, and dreamed of becoming a model. Neighbors described them as kind and peaceful people. The girl was open and bright-smiled, inspiring sympathy and trust. Her life seemed solid and predictable: school, friends, family. Nothing foreshadowed that this ordinary home, filled with laughter, would become the place where tragedy unfolded. Esmeralda Ríchez belonged to a generation for whom the smartphone had become the center of everyday life. Most of her free time was spent scrolling through short videos, joining conversations in the comments, hitting like, listening to music, and keeping up with trends. Her room was set up for filming: a ring light, a tripod, a mirror, and several outfits. For Esmeralda, TikTok wasn't just a hobby, it was part of her reality. Her TikTok page was well known among teens in Higuay. People recognized her by her signature dance videos and the smile that seemed like it never faded. Unlike many others, she didn't use shock value, didn't chase drama. She simply filmed herself dancing, singing, laughing with friends. Her style was light and natural, and that's exactly what drew people in. Her followers kept growing, and with every new video, Esmeralda felt like she was becoming someone important. She dreamed of becoming a model. Her phone held dozens of photos she sent to online casting calls. In her mind, the plan was simple. Online popularity could be the first step toward real recognition. Her parents didn't object, thinking it was just a harmless interest. Her mother, Isabel, sometimes asked her to focus more on schoolwork, but Esmeralda promised to do better, and then went right back to the screen. Friends noticed that Esmeralda rarely put her phone down. Even when they hung out, she checked notifications, edited videos, and chose filters. Over time, it grew into a dependency. she struggled to go a day without posting. Each new video became a small test for her. The wait for viewer reactions brought both excitement and anxiety. At the end of 2022, an unusual video appeared in Esmeralda's feed. It was nothing like her usual content, no dancing, no music, just text on the screen that read, "They'll bring me flowers when I'm gone on February 13th. She posted it late at night and didn't explain what she meant. There were almost no comments, and no one paid attention. A few days later, she went back to her usual style of videos, and the strange phrase was quickly forgotten. Later, her friends recalled that during that time, Esmeralda looked completely normal, cheerful, energetic, confident. There were no signs of distress or communication issues. She talked a lot about the future, discussed clothes, filming ideas, and new music with her friends. Her life seemed whole and clear, with no hint of worry. Among those who knew her, no one saw anything dangerous in that video. For teenagers, phrases like that were part of internet culture, part of the game, a quote, a way to get attention. But that short video would become the only clue people would look back to a year later, trying to make sense of what happened. Back then, it seemed insignificant, almost accidental. But later, it would become the first warning sign that something subtle, but deeply important, had started to change in her life. John Kelly Martinez arrived at Higuay High School about a year before the events that would later shake the entire city. He was 35 years old, taught mathematics, and quickly became one of the most beloved teachers at the school. Unlike many of his older colleagues, he preferred a more relaxed approach, allowing students to call him by his first name, joking around, and participating in school events. To the teenagers, he seemed like one of them, a teacher who understood their humor and interests and spoke their language. His teaching style was just as unusual. He did not insist on memorizing the material. Instead, he explained the material in simple terms, focusing more on understanding than on grades. His classroom had a relaxed atmosphere in which even struggling students felt comfortable. Martinez knew how to connect with people, and the school administration considered him a model of the modern teacher, a professional who truly resonated with his students. Parents respected him too. He came across as a polite, responsible man, a family man raising 2 daughters. At parent-teacher conferences, he spoke with conviction about the importance of education and supporting teenagers through their difficulties. No one questioned his professionalism. Over time, he began to spend more time with his students outside of class, helping them prepare for exams, conducting extra lessons, and even discussing personal problems with them. For many, he became more than just a teacher. He was an adult they trusted. His ability to make students feel listened to and understood seemed rare, and it reinforced his image as a teacher with whom students can really talk. It was during these after-school meetings that the situation began to go beyond what was acceptable, what was later described as boundary violations. John began to show an unusual interest in his students, especially the girls. His attention seemed excessive, although at first glance, it did not cause alarm. He stayed after class for private conversations, sent messages in the evening, asked how they were feeling, or commented on their appearance. At the time, these gestures were seen as expressions of kindness. Esmeralda was one of the students who trusted him completely. She admired him. He was someone she respected, who valued her efforts and accuracy. For a girl seeking popularity on the internet and dreaming of recognition, the attention of a respected adult was particularly meaningful. No one at school found their interaction suspicious. Neither the staff, nor the parents, nor even Esmeralda herself considered his behavior threatening. In a school environment, such relationships are often disguised as well-intentioned. They are dismissed as mentoring or emotional support. Only later did it become clear that Martinez had abused her trust, blurring the line between professional duty and personal involvement. He knew how to make an impression. How to say just enough and when to say nothing at all. A calm voice, confident posture, polite manners, everything about him appeared flawless. No one could have imagined that the man students looked up to, the one who seemed like a role model, could pose a danger. At the time, it all looked simple. A friendly, approachable, well-respected teacher. Someone who was trusted without question. February 12th, 2023 was a Sunday like any other. Esmeralda spent the morning helping her mom at their roadside stand, working on homework and texting with friends. Toward evening, she received a message from John Kelly Martinez. He suggested something unusual, a little educational outing to a local fair, along with his cousin and a few of her classmates. The idea seemed harmless, just a quick trip to unwind before a new school week. Esmeralda's mother, Isabel, was hesitant. It was late, her husband was away, and she couldn't talk it through with him. John reassured her. The trip would only last a couple of hours, and he'd make sure the girls were safe. After a short pause, Isabel agreed, under one condition. Esmeralda had to be back before 9 p.m. Esmeralda promised and hurried out to the car. Inside were 3 of her classmates, chatting and laughing, and John's 25-year-old cousin, Ruben. The mood was upbeat. Everyone was joking, sharing weekend plans. It would only be later that the truth came out. Martinez had never intended to take them to a fair. After they left town, he told them the event had been canceled. Instead, he suggested going to Mau Beach. The girls were excited. A spontaneous trip to the coast sounded even better, but no one informed Isabel about the change of plans. The drive took nearly an hour. Long roads, scattered lights, loud music playing from the speakers. Along the way, John pulled into a gas station. He stepped inside the store and came back with a plastic bag. According to the later investigation, inside were a bottle of beer and a packet of pills. None of the teens thought much of it. John was driving, Ruben sat beside him, and the girls were in the back seat, laughing, filming short clips for social media. After a while, John asked Esmeralda to come sit up front, saying he wanted to show her the route. Once she was seated next to him, he poured the beer into a plastic cup and added several pills. One of the girls noticed, but said nothing. Fear of speaking up to an adult overrode any concern. Esmeralda drank it, unaware of what had been mixed into the cup. Soon, her energy faded. She stopped joining the conversations. She looked tired, out of it. The others assumed she wasn't feeling well, maybe from the heat or the long ride. By the time they reached the beach, the sun was already starting to set. John parked the car away from the main lot, explaining it was safer that way. He suggested everyone head down to the water, but asked Esmeralda to stay behind for a moment, said he needed help with a few things. The other girls and Ruben went ahead. Esmeralda stayed by the car with the teacher, feeling no reason to worry. It felt like just another evening, an outing with a trusted adult. No obvious threats, just a few small details. The change of destination, the alcohol, the strange behavior, that in hindsight would form a fatal pattern. But no one realized that what seemed like a harmless trip had already become something else entirely. Darkness slowly began to fall over the beach. The sound of waves drowned out the voices. When the girls returned after a while, the car was still there, but Esmeralda was nowhere in sight. A little later, the teacher came back and said she was resting inside, feeling a bit better. His voice was calm. Nothing about him seemed off. No one thought to question him. The beach started to empty out. The girls asked to head home, but Martinez kept delaying. He said he was tired, just needed a bit longer before driving. It didn't make sense. Why stay when the sun had nearly disappeared? Soon, the girls noticed Esmeralda still hadn't come out of the car. They asked if she was okay. John gave a short reply. She's sleeping. Let her rest. As night crept in, he finally said it was time to go. The others took their seats, but Esmeralda still hadn't appeared. That's when Martinez told them she'd be riding up front, so the others would have more space in the back. None of the girls objected. None of them saw her. None of them knew what condition she was in. Once the car started moving, the silence felt off. The girls whispered among themselves, but Martinez didn't join the conversation. In the rearview mirror, they could only see his face and the still figure of Esmeralda beside him. When they asked questions, he answered vaguely, as if nothing unusual had happened. The drive from the beach to the next stop, a gas station, took less than an hour. But in that short window, the peaceful night had completely unraveled. When the car stopped and the others stepped out for a few minutes, Esmeralda stayed behind, alone, too weak to call for help. After they'd left the beach, Esmeralda began to feel worse. Her face had gone pale. She wasn't speaking much, held her stomach, and struggled to keep her eyes open. The other girls noticed her condition and asked the teacher to stop somewhere. John agreed and pulled into the nearest gas station. Surveillance cameras recorded the time, 9:45 p.m. The footage showed Esmeralda, unsteady on her feet, heading toward the restroom. Just a few minutes later, employees at the station discovered a large amount of blood inside. The traces were everywhere, on the floor, the walls, near the sink. While they tried to understand what was happening, Esmeralda had already returned to the car, and John quickly drove away, not allowing anyone to intervene. According to her friends, Esmeralda complained of pain and dizziness. She looked frightened and begged him to stop. John, keeping a calm appearance, said he knew where to buy medicine and drove toward a pharmacy. There, he purchased painkillers, a pack of feminine pads, and emergency contraceptive pills. But he never called medical professionals. The girls couldn't understand why an adult wouldn't take their friend to a hospital. He explained that Esmeralda was having typical issues and felt embarrassed to talk about them. His tone sounded confident, but beneath that calmness, there was tension. He was in a hurry, avoiding eye contact, clearly hiding something. When the car stopped again, he went into a nearby store and bought clothes. The clothes were for Esmeralda because hers were stained with blood. He handed the bag to the back seat, offering no explanation. The girls stayed silent, realizing something was very wrong. Esmeralda was trying to hold on, but her condition was getting worse. She barely responded, sometimes closing her eyes as if she was slipping in and out. John watched her, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control. But still, he didn't reach out for medical help. His actions weren't about protecting her. They were about covering up what had already happened. He knew that with every mile, the truth was getting harder to hide. But instead of stopping at a hospital, he kept driving home, pretending everything was still under control. That night, the cold logic of an adult collided with the pain and fear of a child. Esmeralda needed help, but the one person who should have protected her chose silence and deception. Late that night, close to 11 p.m., John Martinez's car pulled up to the Ríchez home. He left quickly, while Esmeralda's mother, Isabel, greeted her daughter with clear frustration. She was late, there had been no warning, and she was in different clothes. Isabel had no idea what this delay was hiding. Isabel spoke calmly, but with disappointment. Exhausted and pale, Esmeralda didn't explain. She only said she was tired and went straight to her room, where her friend, who had also been on the trip, was waiting. The room was completely quiet. Esmeralda lay down, turning toward the wall. Her friend saw her holding her stomach, wincing in pain, trying not to make a sound. When asked if they should call her parents, she whispered, "Don't. It'll pass." Her voice was weak. Closer to dawn, the friend woke up. Esmeralda was motionless, eyes closed. Her breathing was heavy, but steady. Thinking she was simply sleeping, the friend didn't want to disturb her and quietly went home. The door closed behind her, and the house fell silent again. In the morning, around 7, Isabel tried to wake her daughter, but there was no response. When she opened the door, she found an empty bed with bloodstains on the sheets. On the nightstand were a phone charger and a closed notebook. Thinking her daughter might be in the bathroom, Isabel called out for Esmeralda, but there was only silence in return. Then her eyes caught sight of the body, lying face down on the tile floor, surrounded by blood, a knocked-over mug, and a towel. For a few seconds, Isabel stood, frozen. The realization didn't come right away. Then, she screamed, loud and desperate. Elidio came running, followed by their older daughter, Yurimar. Everything after that felt like a dream, trying to lift her up, frantic phone calls, tears, and the kind of silence that fills a home when something irreversible has happened. The medical team that arrived could only confirm the worst. Esmeralda had passed from blood loss, sometime between 3 and 4 a.m. Help could have saved her, but no help ever came. The house, once filled with life, was now eerily still, and Esmeralda's room had become the site of her tragic final moments. The morning of February 13th began in panic. By nightfall, the entire city knew. News of the teenager's death spread fast, first through the neighborhood, then across social media. Her school held a moment of silence in her memory. Her parents were so shocked, they could only repeat one sentence again and again. She was alive last night, and now she's gone. Initial reports were vague. Police recorded the death with no clear signs of outside involvement. Investigators initially suggested a sudden illness or complications from her cycle. That explanation might have been accepted, if not for what witnesses later revealed. Just hours later, new testimony emerged from gas station employees. They said they saw a group of teens and a man who seemed nervous that night. Security footage backed up their claims. It was the first real break in the case. Then came statements from Esmeralda's friends. They admitted the teacher had offered them beer, that Esmeralda wasn't feeling well, and that he had told them not to call their parents. One of the girls shared something chilling. She saw John drop something into Esmeralda's cup before handing it to her. That changed the course of the entire investigation. Police searched Martinez's car. Inside, they found traces of blood and biological material. Forensics confirmed a DNA match between him and samples collected from Esmeralda. They also recovered the same cup, still containing residues of a prescription medication. At first, rumors circulated in the community. Some speculated that Esmeralda had tried to end a pregnancy using banned pills. That theory gained traction after it was revealed Martinez had purchased emergency contraceptives from a pharmacy. But forensic analysis ruled that out. There was no pregnancy. According to the official autopsy report, Esmeralda's death was caused by massive internal bleeding from physical trauma. Her body showed evidence of harm, bruises, scratches, and soft tissue damage. For her parents, it was devastating. They learned that their daughter didn't die from a medical emergency. She died because of a crime. Everything that once seemed confusing now became painfully clear. The teacher they had trusted wasn't just a witness. He was the cause. From that point on, the case was no longer routine. It had become a search for an answer no one wanted to ask. How could someone entrusted with the care of children be responsible for one of their deaths? The key piece of evidence in this case was an audio recording found on Esmeralda's phone. Investigators discovered it while reviewing her recent call history. There was an outgoing call made in the middle of the night. The recipient, a close friend, had been asleep and never heard it ring. When experts recovered the audio, it became clear this wasn't an accidental call. A faint voice could be heard. Esmeralda was whispering that she was in pain and losing a lot of blood. Her breathing was uneven, her words barely understandable. Her final phrase, "I'm dying. Tell them." And then the call cut off. Listening to that recording became a turning point. There was no doubt anymore. She had still been alive after returning home. Investigators confirmed the call took place between 3 and 4 a.m. the exact time frame the medical examiner determined as the time of death. For the investigation, this meant only one thing. The teacher left her in a critical state and did nothing to save her. The recording, in which she was literally speaking about her own death, became the final proof of his responsibility. When the recording was played in court, the room fell silent. That voice, afraid, barely audible, conveyed what no document could. Esmeralda called, hoping someone would hear her, but no one did. The trial began several months after the tragedy. On the defendant's bench sat John Kelly Martinez, the math teacher from Higuay. The courtroom was filled with journalists, parents, and local residents. Every hearing was broadcast on local television. The case became the center of public attention. The school administration quickly released a statement claiming no responsibility for the actions of their employee outside of work hours. They offered condolences, but avoided any discussion of internal investigations. To the Reichz family, it felt like complete indifference. Dozens of witnesses testified. The defense attorney tried to argue that the death was an accident, but the evidence told a different story. The court found John Kelly Martinez guilty of aggressive misconduct toward a minor that resulted in death and sentenced him to 20 years in prison. He was also ordered to pay compensation to the victim's family. For the parents, this decision brought no comfort. They repeated that no sentence could ever bring their daughter back. Money and years behind bars could never balance the loss. The trial ended, but a deep sense of injustice and the haunting question of why no one stopped this before it was too late remained in the air, unanswered.